Welcome everyone to today's webinar. I am Emma Goodman with Becker's Hospital Review. We will begin today's webinar with a panel discussion, and we'll have time at the end of the hour for an audience question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. We are looking forward to hearing your questions. We are pleased to have Scott Becker, publisher of Becker's Healthcare, here to moderate today's panel discussion and audience Q&A. At this time, it is now my pleasure to start today's webinar by introducing our fantastic panel. Becky Adams is a strategic healthcare industry advisor for Workday. We are thrilled to have Becky on the call with us today and want to thank Workday for sponsoring today's webinar. We are also joined by Alicia Acevedo. She's the Chief Human Resources Officer for Evanis Health System. Next, we have Dr. Samir Badlani. Dr. Badlani currently serves as the Chief Health Information Officer for Sutter Health. We are also pleased to have Vic Buzzicaro on the call today. Vic serves as a Senior Vice President with Scripps Health. Last but not least, we are also joined by Ben Patel. He is the Chief Information Officer for Sinai Health System. It's now my pleasure to turn the floor over to Becky to begin today's webinar.
Thank you, Emma, and thanks for the opportunity to sponsor today's webinar and bringing together this fantastic panel of healthcare leaders. So by way of background for those joining us today, Workday is a provider of enterprise cloud ERP to the healthcare industry. And as such, we see firsthand the change that's occurring across financial, clinical, and operational areas, and see information technology crossing many disciplines and offering some of the greatest return in the delivery of care. So it's our mission to work with our customers to implement innovative cloud applications that truly help them improve operational efficiencies and address both the near-term financial management as well as their long-term service and quality requirements. And we all know that's a constant moving target in today's changing landscape of healthcare. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Becker, who's going to moderate today's panel, and look forward to hearing from our presenters.
Becky, thank you. We've got a terrific panel, and there's about 4 different questions I'm going to go through with each of our panelists. I'm going to start now with Dr. Badlani. And to set up the question, changes in the healthcare industry are happening continuously and probably at greater velocity than ever before. And I'm going to ask the same question of all 4 of our health system executive panelists. Dr. Badlani, what do you feel are the most pressing changes today facing healthcare organizations?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this webinar. From our standpoint, there are a bunch of things that are causing us to think differently. The number one, I would say, is we are on a journey of consumerism in healthcare. So what does that mean? We have shifted our focus from managing people's acute medical conditions to focusing on health. So that is the number one pressing change, in my opinion, that I believe health technology will play a very big portion in helping with. The second thing is, the margins are getting compressed for most large healthcare organizations. So how do you continue running a healthy operations, but still providing value to your consumers, your patients, and providing a work environment for your nurses, your physicians, and other staff that they find engaging? And the third one, I would say, is the quadruple aim. At the end of the day, we all want to do well in quality, safety, and other avenues. But as a physician, I was delighted when physician well-being was added to the triple aim in the last couple of years. And that's really important. Physicians are facing significant burnout, and that directly impacts the morale of other care providers and the quality of care our patients receive. So technology is often blamed as one of the reasons physicians are facing burnout. I would submit that that's partially true, not entirely true. And secondly, technology should definitely play a part in physician engagement. And those are the areas of focus for us at Sutter Health.
Dr. Badlani, thank you. Sutter's primarily in Northern California. I'm going to switch to Vic Buzzicaro, who's at Scripps Health System. And Vic, the most pressing changes today facing healthcare organizations?
From our perspective here in San Diego, and we think it's pretty much pervasive throughout the country, is regardless of the scenario of the future that we see and what we also feel that is emerging in any one of the areas that are pressing change, is that we will be reimbursed less in some form or fashion. And so the cost structures of our organizations have to change rather dramatically. I think the exciting thing about the cost structure changes, and that may sound odd to talk about, is that it's finally causing us to imagine very different care models and different ways of approaching reaching out to our patients. And as mentioned before, the whole care model is beginning to be modified through the value-based reimbursement process. It's requiring us to integrate our care. You know, that's been a nice buzzword over the years of integration of care, but we really see now both keeping people out of our hospitals and out of our clinics all the way through the post-acute management of patients, let alone what happens within the hospital, is a very different process today, and we are encouraged by the digitalization that's beginning to take place. We're probably one of the last industries really to take advantage of digitalization, probably for some very good reasons. It's very complex, the confidentiality of the information exchanged, and all the different types of systems that need to be connected, whether they are technology or diagnostic instrumentation or the medical record. And so we all think that we're kind of at the infant stage of how the digitalization will begin to radically transform our organization, where we think we can get to perhaps something that the consumerism, as mentioned before, will reach to, is a much more personalized and customization of care, much of it driven by the patient themselves as they maneuver the system and with Uber-like technology and other kinds of things. Lastly, one that we're observing both at leadership levels and in staff levels, and we see it with patients too, because it's part of what's happening to our reimbursement model, is the pure shift of generations that are working is so profound that we struggle to make sure we're getting the best and brightest talent of the millennials, while at the same time watching boomers age into Medicare and those Medicare roles grow rather dramatically. So it's a rather profound shift as we worry about replacing leaders, and we worry about caring for patients, and we worry about having the right types of staff in the future for the future model of healthcare.
Vic, thank you. That's a great thoughts and answer. Thank you. Alicia, you're with Adventist Health System, hospitals, I think, in several different places throughout the country. Some of your thoughts on the most pressing changes facing healthcare organizations.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate on the panel. I certainly agree with the rest of the panelists that the rise of consumerism certainly is one of the top opportunities for us in healthcare, and really shifting the way that we look at our patient as a consumer, and you know, also value over volume, as well as pressure on costs and outcomes. One of the things that we've certainly thought about specifically as it relates to the rise of consumerism and the shift that we have to make as an organization is thinking about the implication of that shift to our talent. So one of the aspects of that is, as we look at the talent that we have within the organization and look at the way that we retain them, really thinking about if we're expecting our employees to deliver a different service and really cater to the individualized and customized needs of our consumer, it has really made us think through, what does that employee experience need to look like for the employee themselves? So we have looked at the way that that shift in terms of going from HR processes to being more employee-centric and thinking through the life cycle of an employee from the perspective of the time that they join the organization versus going through the hiring process per se, or the time that they do great work or grow the organization versus looking at it from a performance management or a learning standpoint. So just the shift in the view and how we look at the employee and really looking at the life cycle through their eyes gives us an opportunity to be able to figure out how we can then support the organization in its effort in serving our consumer better.
Fascinating, and thank you. Ben, your thoughts on the most pressing changes facing today's healthcare environments or organizations?
Okay, so I think I pretty much would agree with most of the things other panelists have said, but I'll try to reiterate in a different way. Technology, I agree that technology is, one of the reasons why transformation in healthcare is happening. And it's on both the sides, the innovation of how you can adapt innovation in the digital technology to, either impact the top or the bottom line. But at the same time, the same technology can be a cost-driven, for example, cybersecurity. So a lot of those are impacting from a social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. The other thing is, I think it's Samir or Rick talked about demand for value, which is value-based care, but then also I believe it includes the different payment models that are evolving right now. So that's that. The two other factors that we are looking at is one is the socioeconomic factors that determine the health of patients and the communities that we serve. And how does that, impact everything? How can we leverage technology, to help with that? And specifically in Chicago, is there anything we can do to reduce the gun violence? Or is there anything we can do to help that patient, for example, simple thing to just show up for their appointment? So we're trying to leverage technology in those areas, including Uber and Lyft, virtual care, telehealth, and home care, a lot of those kind of things. The other two things are, one is the regulatory landscape, as we all know, is changing, and how is that impacting, a lot of different areas, including IT, and then the the shifting demographics in the U.S. More, I think I read a study by 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be 65 or older. And this is going to create a demand for healthcare to drive, different, model for chronic care. So I think some of those are the changes that we are, not only facing today, but we are looking at how to come up with a different integrated delivery model to help. At the same time, specifically from my side of the story from IT, how can we be more agile and nimble to be able to deal with it?
Ben, thank you very much. We've got 3 more questions for our panelists. The next one is going to deal with how do you see healthcare organizations being affected by the rapidly changing regulatory landscape? And then later on, we'll talk about technology and how it helps organizations face these challenges, and then some of the use of technology to meet business goals. But let me start, Ben, with you, and we'll go the reverse direction with Ben, Alicia, Vic, and Dr. Badlani. Ben, do you want to comment on how the changing regulatory landscape is impacting your healthcare organization and healthcare organizations?
Sure. So with the recent MIPS and MACRA and the ever-evolving, changing regulatory landscape, in my opinion, we will need a very complex and disciplined compliance and risk management programs to deal with that. The other side of the story is we will need, again, the more demand for technology, IT will be asked for. So do more with less resources would come. So I think in that way, we'll need to come up with, an agile IT structure, which is, Gartner calls it bimodal. So something like that will need it to be in place, including a good form of governance to help deal with that. The other item that I believe Samir mentioned is physician burnout and provider burnout with these kind of changing needs and requirements would also need to be dealt with. And the last thing I would say is, this will provide opportunities for innovation. As you can see, a lot of the care is shifting from hospitals to the lower cost sites. So this is also one of those reasons why you'll see a lot of the business going to the retail side of the story. So there'll be some opportunities to either consolidate, acquisition, partnership agreements, or strategic expansion. So I think the regulatory landscape will force us to come up with that. And then the other thing is more wellness and preventive care, which is all the value-based care will probably be more fostered in this area.
Thank you very much. Alicia, the same question for you. How are healthcare organizations being affected by the changing regulatory landscape?
I think that Ben provided a great overview of the different implication of the regulatory landscape. I would say that one perspective of this is, especially for larger health systems with multiple facilities that perhaps in the past had been decentralized, the key aspect of this is ensuring the right infrastructure is in place to be able to be nimble. I think that there are many components of the regulatory changes that we are aware of, and there are many that we are anticipating and waiting for. And in the absence of being able to certainly we can forecast and anticipate, but without having the certainty, is really ensuring that we are establishing nimble enough systems across the infrastructure to be able to react to whatever changes may come. So, and that goes from system related to certain, well-being of our physicians and quality and outcomes, as well as systems that are touching our talent within the organization.
And Vic, let me ask you the same question. How is the rapidly changing healthcare or regulatory landscape impacting organizations?
Well, one of the things we observe is there's lots of uncertainty across our industry, and of course, the political environment has added to it, whether state or national, as we look at how we're affected by potential changes, talked about changes, or changes that do eventually take place. And we see it manifests in a couple of ways. And one is that organizations are unsure what to really change to and how much to change or at what pace to change. Do you change too quickly, leave revenue on the table by perhaps becoming a very aggressive in a value-based reimbursement when there are still fee-based reimbursement systems there? Do you shift more to the outpatient at a much lower cost, which is less revenue on our part, but lower cost to our consumers and our purchasers, who certainly see that as advantageous, which we know we need to do. But in the meantime, how that affects our well-being is certainly important, very important to manage. One of the things that we concentrate on is focusing on our mission and taking care of the patients, and that's what we've been about for more than 100 years. And we believe that regardless of the changes out there, regulatory changes, we're going to be around another 100 years as long as we stay focused on the right things. One of the things the changes are doing is increasing the cost burden. Particularly, we see it in California as regulatory load from our state. We have many unfunded mandates, which drives us to begin to entertain to do things that we never thought we would do before. And I think it drives digitalization and the use of Internet of Things, which is really a new concept for healthcare, to decrease our overall cost. And we are optimistic that those are available just right on the cusp of. We've not truly taken advantage of them in the past, but we see them right on the edge for us. The other thing it does is, which is I think negative to the talent of the organization or the industry, is it creates tremendous organizational drag by increasing more issues we've got to deal with, For example, we mentioned we have to increase perhaps compliance and risk, which is extraordinarily important to manage. At the same time, it slows down and restricts the ability of individuals to contribute in a significant way, which was one of my concerns, is our industry attractiveness to millennials is a little less than perhaps other industries, which are maybe picking off the top 25% or maybe the top 2 quartiles, leaving us with only those who are just dedicated to science, are dedicated to caring for people, and those who like stability of our industry, which in some cases we're pulling from the lower end of the spectrum of our labor market. And that, I think, is an insidious thing for us during this time in which we need to innovate, not only to deal with regulatory issues, but the other issues we spoke about earlier.
Fascinating, and thank you. Dr. Badlani, the same question. How is the changing regulatory landscape impacting healthcare organizations?
Sure. So I'm going to struggle to say anything that hasn't been expressed so eloquently by the other panelists, but we'll take the opportunity to reiterate what I feel is important to us and what we see. I think the only thing permanent is change, and while we all feel that there is a lot of uncertainty and changes coming down the pike, somehow, having been in this field for over 15 years, I feel that is how it has always been. I look back to the changes that would come around meaningful use, and one day it's 90 days, the other day it's full year reporting, and so on. And I think the best strategy is to remain very true to your mission, as Vic pointed out, and then to leverage technology to become a really agile organization, as was suggested earlier. We have to have a laser-like focus on our margins. I know that historically, not-for-profit or non-profit organizations have shied away from being very bold about it. I think that needs to change, because as a community-based organization, whatever profit we make gets reinvested for the benefit of our community. I have a physician colleague who's from Italy, and he says this saying in Italian, which I won't be able to share or will mess it up, but it basically means that without money, even the saints don't do miracles. And I think if we are to continue doing our mission, we really have to focus on having healthy margins, leveraging technology for our missions, and really focusing on the community and patients we serve.
Well, Dr. Badlani, thank you. It would have certainly been more fun if you would have tried that in Italian, but we'll let you off the hook on that.
I don't have to practice.
The next question I'm going to direct at Becky Adams and you, Dr. Badlani. And Becky, we're going to start with you. We've heard about lots of changes generally facing healthcare organizations, then regulatory changes. We've heard about generational issues, workforce issues, the movement to value-based care. How do you feel technology can help organizations face some of these changes?
That's a great question, Scott. So one of the concepts several have referenced is the digital organization. And I think this is kind of focused in 3 areas. The first, creating value at the business level. The second is creating value in the processes at the patient experience level, which of course is tied back to the mission of care. And then the last is building the foundational capabilities to support the organizational structure, which is changing as well relative to continuity and care. So we all know that technology itself does not drive the transformation or mitigate the risk and change. So I think in order for it to be effective and to deliver this digital transformation, it's necessary to align the technology to the people and processes. And I think that seems pretty basic, but from our experience, it's often an area that's underinvested. So ultimately, I think for the providers, the digital strategy should be about freeing up resources and to focus on meeting the patient expectations and readying the organization to effectively prepare for, and oftentimes in pretty short order, the regulatory changes, that movement in margin, the cost reductions, and having, access to the information that allows them to do that but most importantly is to grow and scale operations without adding costs, because ultimately, every dollar that is not coming in the door is, it's creating some impact elsewhere in the organization. So I think it's really important to think about that.
And Dr. Bhadwani, Becky, thank you. And Dr. Bhadwani, the same question. How can technology, great answer on trying to scale it more efficiently and without adding more cost, which is everybody's trying to figure out today. Some of your thoughts on how technology can help organizations face changes.
Sure. In my opinion, technology is a double-edged sword. It can be the solution, but occasionally, or maybe a little more than occasionally, ends up being a distraction. We are too enamored by shiny new toys that we see in the marketplace and run after, think of them as a hammer looking for a nail for a solution. The other challenge is there is a lot of buzzwords. So it was cloud technology a few years ago that has relatively calmed down. A couple of years ago, it was predictive analytics was going to solve everything. And, now it's artificial intelligence. And actually, if you keep up with this, which I know you guys do, it's blockchain is going to solve everything. So, what I would caution all the listeners is to really focus on why are you investing in a new technology? What use case will it solve? And why wasn't the previous attempt in that space not helpful? I think those are healthy habits and curiosity that will take us far. The last point I will make on this is digital health is something that will truly make a difference. However, more often than not, I see people talk about digital health as an app in front of the patient. And absolutely, digital patient engagement is very important. But when I think of digital health, I think of digital transformation at a multi-level state. So it's not only digital patient engagement, it's digital physician and nurse engagement. And that's much more than Epic and Cerner and the other EHRs. It has a lot to do with non-EHR technologies and how they affect our workplace. And then the digital engine or the technology engine that runs our workforce and the processes we do. I hardly see people leveraging enterprise service bus in ways that I have seen other places do. I know of very few places, except one that I used to work before, that has leveraged a complex event processing and automated workflows as the way to make a difference. And those are the places that, I hope to lead some of the change at Sutter Health with my other colleagues, and also look forward to learning from other people on the panel and outside.
Thank you, Dr. Bhadwani. Is another question, whether there's a CIO, Chief Human Resources Officer, Chief Health Information Officer, or Senior Vice President, the question is, what do you look for in a technology solution to help your organization meet its business goals? And sort of what technologies are you exploring, and what are you hoping for? Alicia, I'm going to start with you, and sort of what do you look for in technology solutions, and what are you exploring currently and hoping for?
Great, happy to take that first one. So, we have thought a lot about, the approach that we need to take with technology and creating a consistent framework through which we look for in identifying potential technologies. And obviously, first and foremost, it needs to ensure that it meets the business objective of the organization. And so that's the first priority. We've also looked at ensuring that technology that we choose is employee-centric. So talking about really the shift in the way that we look at the employee experience, that's an important component for us. So ensuring that from an employee experience standpoint, that's really the first, one of the first priorities that we look at. The second is ensuring that while the system is locally relevant, there is a consistency that's applied across the enterprise. Obviously, with having facilities in different markets, there are different values, different opportunities, different perspective that needs to be taken into consideration. So, but to be able to manage the ability to be nimble as a health system, that consistency across the enterprise, and it will give us the agility needed to be able to shift, both to be able to support a new business opportunity or a business objective, or react to a regulatory change that we need to be able to support from a talent perspective. So really finding that balance between consistency, agility across the enterprise, and figuring out how it can still be locally relevant given the diversity of markets that we serve. The other one is really ensuring that it's simple. I think that as we look at different technologies, and we sometimes get one of the panelists mentioned, we get enamored with shiny objects, and sometimes it tends to complicate the entire ecosystem of the different technologies. So really thinking through if it's a current technology that we're looking to improve, or to be able to partner with another vendor, we're looking ways to simplify it, ensuring that it's simple to navigate, simple to use, both from all the users that may be interacting with that system. Another opportunity is really ensuring that it's collaborative. So as we know, the organizational design of organization is constantly shifting. So we've talked earlier about looking at the past and really ensuring that from an organizational structure, it's very facility or hospital centric. And as we look at a different continuum of care, the organizational design changes. So with that comes greater collaboration. As we look at a seamless care that we want to provide our consumers, that collaboration across the organization is critical. So ensuring that our systems that we look at combining or putting together in our ecosystem allow our users to be able to collaborate across the environment. And finally, and I think we've all talked about this, certainly, is ensuring that the technology is mobile. And with the shifting demographic of our workforce, that component is very important for us. So I think that's a quick overview of some of the things that we certainly look for as we identify and think through different technology that we may add to our ecosystem. And go ahead.
No, I was going to say thank you. At least I picked up a handful of key points on that. Simple to use, mobile, consistent across the whole enterprise, able to manage nationally but use locally. And I know you had made a couple other points as well, but let me let you finish up. I'm sorry.
No, that was the really the quick overview. I know that the second part of your question was really looking at technology or areas that we're exploring. So I can certainly take that unless you had other comments you wanted to make on the first part of the question.
No, please go ahead. And then after you do that and talk about technology you're exploring, we'll turn to Vic Fusacaro from Scripps. So Alicia, please continue.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you. So in terms of technology that we're exploring, I think that one of the important components for us is as we look at the demographics and as we look at the shift in growth area within our organization, we're assessing from a talent perspective, figuring out the right talent tools related to workforce planning and thinking through the different opportunities that we have to look at the demand and look at growth at particular markets, because in some markets, as an organization, certainly we all experience cost pressures that we are reacting to and proactively managing. So the labor and the workforce within the organization is constantly shifting, and it's not always shifting in the same way. So having the talent capabilities to be able to look at the workforce and be able to plan out more proactively is an opportunity for us to really consider and look for. And obviously, as we look for, that's more of an internal facing. Certainly, but there are other certain technologies that we're looking to figure out how we communicate within our organization. So thinking through different collaborative tools to be able to drive that connectivity that we're looking for across the enterprise. So I would mention a couple. I'm sure the rest of the panel has wonderful examples they're looking forward to sharing as well.
No, thank you. And I think it's a fascinating comment you made earlier on looking at an employee's life cycle over the course of their career versus just as a starting point or single points, and then also on the collaborative importance of the technology. So thank you. Vic, to yourself, what do you look for in a technology solution to help your organization meet its business goals? And what technologies are you exploring, and what are you hoping for in those?
Yeah, thanks for asking. For us, we have been on this journey of connectivity now for long periods of time, and I think all of us have in some form or fashion, and it, in some respects, has come light years from where it's been, but still not quite where we want it to be. So that connectivity engages our patients in a much more meaningful way and allows them to not only be consumers, but also as patients, through the use of the Internet of Things, actually get care or access care and collaborate with their physicians and care providers. And I think that collaboration through connectivity is the piece that we really feel strongly about, that maybe some of our newest iterations will provide us as we go forward. And we've come close in the non-clinical areas of having some strong collaboration take place. Of course, that connectivity, a lot of us like to talk about self-service, whether it's employees or patients or consumers out in the marketplace. What we're really asking for them to do is have direct access into things. We're not trying to delegate our work to them and them kind of do their own care, but have people be able to have direct access any way they want. For us, as we move forward, though, and getting past the connectivity and collaboration, we, I think like all of us, have data overload. We've been processing large amounts of data for years. Our IS groups have done phenomenal jobs with that. We have more records than we can look at. But what we don't have is we don't have strong intelligence and out of these systems. And so using the intelligence and building AI or artificial intelligence appendages to help us be able to make sense of what we've got, and for a patient to make sense of what they have, or an employee to make sense of what's available to them, to be able to work smarter and more effectively versus just try to take it all on because we've got to collect it all. We have a very, very strong culture at Scripps that attracts a lot of people. However, one of the things that repels people, and Alicia mentioned it, is when we look at the newer generation, as they come in and look at our technology, most of them believe it's pretty darn clunky. And really what they're talking about is how mobile is it, how smart is it, how does it enhance their lives and the way they work. And we've probably not done the best job in that arena as an industry. And so we are actively looking at ways to enable our people with better intelligence and at the fingertips, so to speak, to them, whether it's mobile or tied to a desk, and use a variety of sources to be able to interact and collaborate with among themselves and with the patients better. You know, when you look at the labor industry today and you think of these type of high-tech workers, you think, well, they're all going to Silicon Valley. But digging further into the data, and I know my IS colleagues here will know, one of the largest competitors to Silicon Valley today has now moved back to be, if you will, the old Detroit, the auto industry. And that when you look at a Tesla, it's nothing but a computer with a battery. And so what kind of people work on a car like that? It's certainly not an assembler or a manufacturer or a welder or whatever. It's an entirely different type of worker. And I would submit that we're slowly starting to move in that direction in healthcare, but have yet to realize that those are the types of skills and the types of talent that is going to help us transform our industry, just as the auto industry is becoming transformed today. Certainly, you go in and have your computer adjusted almost as much as you go in and have your carburetor adjusted in a car. So the world is changing, and healthcare is right there. the things we are really looking for is the way to enable our staff to use artificial intelligence and collaborate to build a better, more personalized, customized kind of approach to our patients. And by the way, that goes for employees too. We kind of communicate anything and everything to them, and it should be very customized to what they need. And I think we'll be on that cusp right now.
Fascinating. So use of AI, better approach for your patients, for your employees, more customized and more efficient too. Ben, the same question for you. It's what do you look for in a technology solution to help you meet your business goals, and what technologies are you exploring currently?
So from a technology standpoint, what I look for is an ROI model. Does this justify the investment, and does that, meet the business goal? We also look at, I think Wick talked about, giving the example of Tesla. One of the things that I look for is this a transformative technology? Is it transforming something? And if it is, what it is? And how does that get us and get out of, from a long-term scalable standpoint, how much more investment you need to make, 2 years, 5 years down the road? The other thing we look at is how integrated this technology is with your existing workflow and tech layers that you have, because every organization has a different stack of technologies that's being used across the board. And the two other items that we'll look at is this patient-centric or not? Because we are into this patient-centric and community wellness business now, and we want to make sure that it is surrounding around our customer, which is patient. And then adoption, how is this supportable, and what kind of support is needed? And then the other thing is usage. Will this technology be adopted, or will have everything lined up, but then the users are not going to adapt because of the cultural issues at the organization? And if so, what needs to be done for an adoption? So who's going to champion it? What kind of governance and advocacy we need? So those are, and then obviously security, which is a big thing nowadays that we'll look at. Every technology that we, how is it going to expose us from a secure security standpoint and compliance standpoint? So we look at all these factors together as things come into. The technology that we're today looking at is more around adopting the digital footprint, whether it is biometric. I'm not going to use the word cloud because I know somebody hates it. I'm going to say SaaS. So we'll look at those kind of application, patient experience, technology or engagement. At the same time, the AI side of the story, such as cognitive computing, predictive analytics, that can help us with a lot of readmission, staffing ratios, cognitive, again, to help physicians do a lot of differential diagnosis, such as Watson, and then machine learning to see if we can decode, X-rays and things like that. So we're looking at some of these from a cognitive standpoint, and then we're also looking at cybersecurity technologies that is going to make us feel better in terms of how we are using the whole ecosystem of technologies here to do our business.
Ben, thank you. I heard in your first response at least 5 different things: return on investment, patient-centric, is it going to be easier or hard to support? 4th, usage, will people use it? Is it going to have a champion? And then 5, how's it going to interact with your security atmosphere? Is it going to leave you more exposed, less exposed, and so forth? And then a number of thoughts and things you're looking at now. So thank you very much. Dr. Badlani, the same question for you, and then I'm going to turn it up for a follow-up question to Becky Adams. Dr. Badlani, what do you look for in a technology solution to help your organization meet its business goals?
Sure. Let me start by saying, Ben and I go way back, so I enjoyed the jab at me about cloud. I'd just like to clarify that I don't hate cloud. I just have a general dislike for buzzwords that talk about solutions and not the actual problem. So that's all that initial comment was. Let me try to add a couple of things that I don't think have been expressed. We get a lot of solutions that claim to be disruptive, when I look at technology, I completely agree about the total cost of ownership that was expressed in a different way. But I'm looking to see what will automate our workflow, what will truly digitally transform the way we do business. So if a technology, all it does is gives me more information to analyze and act upon subsequently, that to me is missing a very important piece, and that's automation. From physicians to nurses to other people in the healthcare apparatus, I'm looking for technologies that take away tasks and standardize how we do individual pieces of our daily workflow so that there is consistency and there is no inertia waiting on an individual to act. So automation and less or minimal disruption of a clinician workflow are the two things that I look for a lot.
Thank you. And what are technologies that you're exploring currently? Are there current technologies you're looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I missed not answering that question. We're looking at technologies in the complex event processing space that I mentioned that allow you to do that. We're also looking at technologies that allow us to segment our populations and leverage non-healthcare data like Ben mentioned earlier. But then how can we generate insights from those analytics and act upon it and not, again, add more data for the physician or the nurse or the case manager to consume? And then interoperability amongst various silos of any large healthcare organization. So technologies, I won't say HIE, but I will say technologies that allow us to get over the silos and present the necessary information from one part of a healthcare organization to the other and automate the workflow. Those are the places that we are really interested in.
Thank you very, very much. Becky, how do you see the role of technology providers helping the healthcare industry meet their changing business and patient care goals?
So this is a question, we as a vendor ask ourselves every day, Scott, and it really comes down to, are we providing the value and also the empathy that our customers expect and need, given the industry dynamics? So core to our Workday strategy is the desire to help reduce complexity and to deliver a more whole product solution and eliminating some of these traditional silos that, healthcare providers have faced. But it's also important that in doing that, we're delivering that, necessary agility, that nimbleness, and innovation that they need to reinvent when necessary. So we really look at, the basic application capabilities as the bedrock, and look to surround that and stabilize that with innovation. And a lot of that has been referenced in terms of mobile or predictive analytics. Social is a real big component to it. Artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things. But the key for us as a vendor is to make sure these capabilities must be inherent in the technology and not an afterthought. So it really needs to be seamless to that user. And we own that. We own delivering that innovation. So I would say in summary, a lot of what's been talked about in terms of what's important, ease of use, speed, security, insight at the point of decision making. We really look at it in terms of, working with our customers very collaboratively, right? They push us hard to deliver a platform that's future-proof and contributes to their gain in market advantages, right? So whether that be in talent acquisition, patient satisfaction, population health, reducing risk and providing for continuity in both access and tasks, improving controls, which is very important on the regulatory side, and then enabling them to achieve their expected performance objectives, whatever that would be, no matter if, what's occurring in the marketplace around them. So we really look at that from 20,000 feet, and then work with our customers on the technology and the capabilities perspective.
Thank you, Becky. Just fabulous, and I appreciate greatly putting together just a magnificent panel of real leaders from 4 different great systems. We've got about 5 minutes to take audience questions. If our panel and Becky are okay with that, I'll open it up to a couple of those. I've got a first question, and Ben, it's really a follow-on to something you said. Does ROI always have to be direct increased revenue, or can it be better throughput, or better use of capacity? Those have value too. You mentioned ROI, and somebody's asking you about how do you look at that?
Yeah, so I think my ROI comment is to do with a CIO or a technology leader being the financial steward for any cost that goes into technology. And ROI model is truly dependent on how you view the cost and revenue side of the story. So if you think that throughput is going to either direct or indirectly help you, I think it'll be great. But you need to have some sort of an ROI model to justify technology, because otherwise, like Samir mentioned, every bright, shiny object, you are going to run after that, or every vendor or every executive who goes out and reads a magazine and brings you an article, you'll end up chasing that. So I think you need to have a model in place to justify this and be able to prove it, that this is something that's going to at least give you a return directly or indirectly.
And you put together several simple rules to use in evaluating technology, and I thought that was very, very helpful. Let me ask another question, and I think this will be aimed more at Vic and Dr. Badwani. Organizations are taking on more and more patient data. How are you managing the tsunami of data, both current and historical clinical data? And I asked the two of you this question because I know, Vic, you touched on this. I think Dr. Badwani, you might have touched on it a bit as well. Vic, do you want to start with that question? How do you manage all this convergence of data?
Well, we began years ago with kind of I think, tried and true approach with an EDW, or electronic data warehouse. And that's begun to help us to some degree. But what we found is it's not the technology for us in managing the data, and it's not the data governance process, and it's not the hardware, software, or even the support to accumulate all this data. And what I would say is governance has allowed us to begin to manage it in an appropriate way, but we really don't know what we've got. And I use that as an example because as we have become involved with Medicare shared savings programs, we have all the data Medicare sends us, and then we try to make sense of it. And what we really don't have, and what we are working hard to create, is some leaders that really are more, someone mentioned it earlier, analytically driven, who can convert all of this information into something meaningful for us. We believe that's where the gold is. We believe that's where we can begin to make changes with workflow. We also believe that married with socioeconomic data, and demographic data out in the community can tell us a different story than just the clinical of what happens when it's in our house, so to speak. And that area, which we are building out under our ACO, we believe is going to be the most fertile, and we're taking very close care in finding the right type of person who, believe it or not, are rare in healthcare. There are a few organizations across the country who have some very strong individuals, but most of us are still struggling with kind of, I don't want to call them spreadsheet jockeys, but people who know their way around Excel. They download a bunch of files and they give you a report on the data. That does nothing for our physicians, for our staff, and for our leaders. And that's just another data dump and another report that stacks up on people's desks. But converting that to meaningful information around population segments, around disease states, or around what I would call workflow areas, can really educate and provide us smarter ways of working. And that's the way we're looking at approaching this.
Great. And Dr. Badwani, I wanted to give you a moment to comment on the same question as how you're dealing with this broad amount of data. And then I had one more question for each, Alicia, and also for Becky. And just to Alicia and Becky, just to give you notice before I get to you, is that the question for Alicia is, what do your employees want in technology? And then for Becky, it's where are you seeing the most interest in different types of technology? And is that increasing, decreasing, flat? And what do you see there? But Dr. Badlani, dealing with the great amount of data coming through the system, just as Vic started the answer, how do you handle that? Or how do you try and make that useful?
Yeah, that's a great question, Scott. As part of the CHIO for Sutter Health, my responsibilities also include the Data and Analytics Office. So I'm the de facto CDO, and this is definitely something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. So a couple of thoughts there. I think we really have to go to the use case and work with our business partners who are requesting data reports or analytics to really talk about two things. One, do they want us to create leading metrics or lagging metrics? And what I found is far too often we spend a lot of time, technology, and money creating really fancy lagging metrics. By definition, these are measures of events that have already happened in the past and do not allow us to change the current state. So there needs to be a healthy mix of leading metrics and few lagging metrics as we focus on building reports and analytics. The second aspect of this is what standard work will the business partner engage in once they have access to these reports. So Vic talked about this should not be an Excel jockey generating fancy reports that sit on somebody else's desk. So part of my conversation as I evangelize the value of data and analytics in healthcare internally and externally is to talk about what will you do once you have access to that information, and how will you ensure all your managers and directors know their tasks in front of them once they have access to this. And I think that's truly the missing piece. We get so enamored by prescriptive analytics and predictive analytics, and definitely they have tremendous value. But if we don't standardize the actions or focus on metrics that allow us to have insights into actions, in spite of all the big data and all the big technologies, we won't be able to move the needle.
Great. Thank you. Alicia, let me ask you the question of what do your employees want in technology? If you have a few thoughts on that.
Sure, I'll keep it brief. When we've asked that question of our employees, they go back to the reason why they started a career in healthcare, and that's really to be able to care for the patient, and they have great compassion, and that's where they find the most value. So as we ask them the question around the technology, they really are looking for ways for us to simplify their work and really declutter the technology and make it easy for them to be able to focus on the things that they love doing. And think of them as really the user versus the technology driving how they interact with it. So that would be a kind of the main drivers. Really figure out how we can simplify the ecosystem of all the technology that they use and figure out a simple way for them to use it, to really give them the space and the time to focus on providing that excellent care to our patients.
Thank you very much. Becky, some final thoughts from you on what you're seeing from hospital systems and where they're investing in technology and what you're hearing on sort of the front lines and what you see.
Yeah, so for us, our core applications extend across, the key areas of financial, supply chain, and human capital. So we really look at those from the operational transactions. But we surround that with pretty comprehensive analytics, both with our solution data as well as other systems clinical data, and we're really being asked to be able to fuse that information together to, as was referenced, to really have that predictive insight, right? To be able to take the necessary actions and not be waiting for reports that are days or weeks old. And so that is really an area that we're moving, and for us, that's in context, right? So it's tied to all of the transactions, both Workday and non. And then I think it's the other piece of our solutions are really geared towards the employees. So it's how do we simplify their tasks associated with their role so that they can commit more time to the mission. And that's through some of the traditional things we talked about today. So it's the social, it's the mobile. And really allowing them to do work in the way that they want to do it and when they want it. And so I really think that's critical. We're stretching people further and further, and so we need to give them tools that enable them to be that productive worker. and really do their best work. So we talk a lot about, allowing clinicians to work at the top of their license. There's a lot of really smart people in healthcare across the organization, and we forget about some of the, the business key stakeholders and how important it is for them to be able to do their best work as well, because it really feeds the overall mission.
Great, and I want to thank you, Becky and Workday, just for putting together a great panel today. Just a pleasure to get a chance to listen in and talk with. I'll thank just individually Ben Patel, the CIO of Sinai Health System here in Chicago, Dr. Samir Badlani, CHIO at Sutter Health, large organization, mostly in Northern California, Alicia Azevedo, who offered great insights, particularly on all sides, but on the employee side, in the long-term relationships with employees and technology tools there, Chief Human Resources Officer at Adventist Health System. Thank you, Alicia. And finally, Vic Buzzicaro from the highly regarded Scripps Health System, Senior Vice President, and again, very informative. I thank all of you. Becky, I know some of the audience members may have some follow-up questions. Is there a way to access you if people have follow-up questions, either about the questions they had from the webinar or about Workday?
Absolutely, and I believe that Emma does have our contact information, and we'd be more than happy to do so.
Great. So if people have further questions, Emma will pass on the questions on that if people have asked that we didn't get to Becky. And then if you have further information or want to talk about things with any of the panelists, and particularly Becky, please let us know. Ben, Samir, Alicia, Vic, Becky, we're going to wrap up now, and thank you all very much for your generous use of your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.